It's a complex, corrupt, confusing world these days when it comes to healthy living and eating.
Well, and who's to believe what I'm saying? And mine is just an opinion. I mean, Belinda is I think, the world expert on vested interests which are shaping dietary guidelines. Now, she fell into that because I was targeted by the food industry here in Australia. We've got their internal email saying, these 7 people are to be targeted. And I was the only doctor on that list. So I was reported to the medical board on 3 occasions for giving the advice to stop reducing sugar. I got reported on 1 occasion for inappropriately reversing someone's diabetes. We're not allowed to do that, and certainly not on national TV when we did it. And I honestly thought this was a joke when I started getting reported, because I'm personally seeing the benefits for myself, my team, my family, my patients. Literally, with people coming into hospital with diabetic foot complications, and I just cut. And the hospital serving them ice cream 3 times a day, which is driving me insane. I said, stop that. Let's reduce the sugar. Let's give them some, I was really radical. I said, I prescribed eggs and cheese and a full-fat yogurt. I'd have to write on the medication chart that I wanted my patient prescribed them to have eggs and cheese, because the hospitals wouldn't do it. So, portions of cheese, I'd write it on the medication chart. And literally, just with that, horrendously dangerous intervention, they started healing. So, I'm seeing all those benefits, and yet I'm reported. I literally, and that's how I've literally done a PhD in nutrition/biochemistry. I don't have a PhD in it, but because I had to defend that turf, I've become quite knowledgeable in it. People can argue whether I'm right or wrong, but Belinda's research was in who's behind reporting me, and then she's just ended up going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and that's why she knows so much about this stuff. And I'm just scratching the surface of it with these comments at the moment, and I recommend to people go along and have a look at her work on YouTube. And again, she just scratches the surface of what they've been up to for 100 years, what they've been up to. People talk about, the origins of the food pyramid, but it goes back way before that. It goes back to temperance movement times in mid-19th century, 1850, 1860, when we started developing some of our current food practices. And so temperance movement at that time, that was a time when industry was taking off and people were moving from the farms into the cities. To get food from out of the farms into the cities, the plant matter would rot. The animal-based foods, the animals would be slaughtered in the country, and then they had to be salted. And if they weren't salted, they ended up being a bit putrid. So you couldn't eat the meats there. The water wasn't safe to drink, so that's why the alcohol, it's a name for light beer, but essentially the mead, the alcohol was actually in the water. So everyone was drinking a light beer because it was sterile in comparison to the water. So as a result, everyone's half drunk, they're eating poorly, the food salted to actually make it safe when it wasn't safe, and people would get sick. And I think that's the origins of the demonization of salt. Goes back to temperance movement time. But right in the midst of it, this temperance movement was the origins of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and it just then flowed on to then becoming the cereal industry, invented for bland food, dietary guidelines, metabolic health disaster we have now.
So given all that and how deeply entwined these roots are of the current information we're being fed, what are we supposed to do?
I'll summarize it in one sentence. I've been silly enough brave enough, whatever, to actually summarise the dietary guidelines for the world in one sentence. I don't know if you heard me say it. I quoted a bit. We should be eating fresh, local, seasonal, whole food based on our environment and culture, avoiding added sugar and processed food. That's it. You can read into that whatever you want. I've described there an evolutionary diet. That's the way we evolved. It's the way we've evolved over a couple of million years, in particular the last couple of 100,000. We've tampered with it for the last 10,000 years since the agricultural revolution. And once we started eating far more grains, then we've started introducing health issues. And we can look at our skeletons to see that. Once we've started introducing seed oils into the equation in the last 100 years in particular, certainly the last 50 years, then we've seen an escalation of our inflammation. So if I come back to that root group, that pathway, eat fresh, local, seasonal, whole food, then we're safe. We take food miles out of that. Based on our environment means we're talking about latitude and vitamin D. And then taking sugar and processed food out, I can't simplify it down more than that. You may want to add in processed food into that. You may want to add in sugar into it. You may want to add in fruit, but you're going to pay a price for it. So that's what the individual can do. So that's a decentralized concept. It means you're going to be taking money away from the corporates. You're going to be supporting your local farmers. That's a good thing. Because we need to, in this huge world that we have, ultimately our survival is going to be dependent on supporting our local industry, our local farmers. So I've got no trouble, you can't quite hear out the window. We've got our own sheep and chickens, and that can't be any more fresh, local, and seasonal than what they produce. So that's what do you do? That's just common sense. The moment you go to the supermarket, you're going to be exposed to advertising. The moment you open a magazine or a newspaper or turn on the media or your computer, you're going to be exposed to advertising, propaganda. So I ask people to come back to common sense, which has been abandoned by the vast majority of society, but that's just a little bit of cynicism. Everything else is a complication beyond common sense.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Once you understand where the non-science is coming from, where the propaganda is coming from, and it is industry, pharmaceutical, and religious ideology, now I understand why I was conned in my medical education.